Well, very happy and pleased to see you this morning, and today we are celebrating Wesak. We believe that Buddha was born, became awakened, became a Buddha, and he passed away on this day of Wesak, which is the full moon day of the month of May. Although we think of the birth, the awakening and the death of a Buddha, it is important to understand that a Buddha is never born, never grows old, never dies. This is because a Buddha is a person who doesn't exist. What does that mean? The person who was born, that we call the Buddha, was not the Buddha who was born. It was Prince Siddhartha as a human being who was born. When Prince Siddhartha became a Buddha, he awakened from the dream of existence. That means he realized that he did not exist. What this means is that although we think we are existing, we are not really existing. This is the important thing to understand in the teachings of the Buddha. How he began to understand that he was not existing is the important story of the Buddha. The Buddha is not just an ordinary person. he has been practicing what are called the paramitas. The paramitas are really qualifications to become a Buddha. Just as if you go into a university to get a PhD, you can't just go and get it. You can't even just pay money and get it. You have to qualify for that. Without qualifying, you cannot get that PhD. In the same way, to become a Buddha, you have to qualify for that. And this qualification is a sacrifice. A sacrifice means to give up everything that you call mine. We tend to become attached to things that we see or hear or smell or taste or touch. And we want to make what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, we want to make them mine. This is my property. To call it mine is to personalize. We have a good word in English, personalize. Personalize is to say, this is mine. Now when we go to buy a pen, that salesman might say, we can personalize it for you. That means to write the name, your name on the pen. To personalize is to say, this is mine. That is the personal property. So we like to personalize things and say, this is mine. So, but when we practice the paramitas, what we are really doing is we depersonalize things. To say this is not mine. To give up all attachments to things. And in order to give up attachment to things, we have to let go of things. All our properties that we think are mine, we have to give up. We have to give up in the way that you remember the story of the king Vesak. who gave up all the properties in the palace. He called people, whoever wants, come and take it away. He gave up everything. Then he had 2 children, a son and a daughter. When someone came and asked for the children, he gave up even the children. Then it was the Sakra, the king of the heaven, who thought he might even lose his wife. So the Deva, Sakra, came and asked for the wife. He said, okay, give up the wife also. So what the Sakra did was, he said, okay, now this wife is mine, not yours. But I leave your wife to look after you. That is, the wife is under you. The wife is mine, but the wife will look after you. So, but you see, the important thing here is that he gave up everything. And he has been giving up not only just the children and the wife, he has given his own life. When there was a tiger who was trying to eat the children, he sacrificed his own life to the tiger. That is how he ultimately was born as Prince Siddhartha. He gave up his life also. So that is why when he was born, even as a child, when there was a few minutes when even those babysitters who were looking after the child became interested in the plowing ceremony. He was alone. And that moment, because he had given up everything, given up all attachments, he automatically entered the first jhana. Entering the jhana, today people translate the word Samadhi as concentration. Samadhi is not concentration. Samadhi is giving up, letting go, giving up attachments. We are normally attached to what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we touch. Because we are born with 5 senses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body. through these five senses, we experience three kinds of sensations: pleasant, unpleasant, and the neutral. We desire the pleasant sensation, we hate the unpleasant sensation. And the neutral sensation, we just let it be. Now, that is our reaction to three kinds of feelings. That is the normal, natural way. So entering Samadhi is to give up this reaction to pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings. It's a complete emptying of the mind. The emptying of the mind that leads to Samadhi. It's a gradual reduction of our experience. A giving up, letting go. This is what the Buddha did. He gave up. So that is why that practicing Samadhi is a letting go. And there are different levels of Samadhi. The different levels of Samadhi is really like climbing a flight of steps. Now to come to this floor, we had to climb a flight of steps. And when we climb the flight of steps, we have to give up the first step to get into the second step. Then we have to give up the second step to get into the third step. And we give up the third step to get into the fourth step. It's like that. To enter Samadhi is to start giving up one by one the steps. There are 4 steps to be given up. And that 4th step is giving up only one part of the mind. That is called the affective. Because when we speak of the mind, there are 2 parts. This is very important to understand. This is something that the Buddha realized that normally people don't know about. One part of the mind is the emotional part. The emotional part. The other part of the mind is the thinking part. These are 2 different parts of the mind, the emotional part and the thinking part. You see, when Buddhists, when they come to the temple or the Buddhist vihara or whatever you call this place, you take the 5 precepts. Now, when you take the 5 precepts, which part of the mind is doing that? It is the thinking part of the mind that takes the 5 precepts. Because the thinking part is aware of what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false. It's the thinking part of the mind that is doing that. And it is this thinking part that takes the 5 precepts. Then you go home and break the 5 precepts. If you become angry, you begin to speak bad language, hurt other people. Who does that? Is it the thinking part that is doing that? Or is it the emotional part that is doing that? It is the emotional part that breaks the 5 precepts. You see, our emotions go against the thinking part. So these 2 parts of the mind begin to go in 2 different directions. This is the problem. This is why there is problem in the world. How many people in the world think there should be peace in the world? There should be no wars in the world. There should be no crime in the world. Everyone thinks like that. Everyone prays for peace, world peace. But what is happening? The world is full of crime, full of wars, full of terrorism. Why is this? This is because people are not able to gain control over the emotions. This is the biggest problem in the world. Controlling our emotions. This is why the Buddha pointed out a way to gain control over the emotions. The entire teaching of the Buddha is about gaining control over the emotions. And this is what the modern psychologists have begun to realize only recently. The Buddha spoke about this more than 2,500 years ago. Only very recently, a scientist, a professor of a university who wrote a book called Stress and Stress Management. What is this thing called stress? Stress is simply not what is going on in the world. Stress means how we react to what is going on in the world. Stress is not something that is happening in the world. Stress is something that is happening inside us. That is what he pointed out. That is our emotions. It is that emotion that the Buddha called tanha, today translated as craving. Tanha is not craving, tanha is emotion. That is what this modern psychologist and scientists call stress. And it was the Buddha who taught us how to gain control over these emotions. The problem is that we have a conflict in the mind. What is that conflict? It's a conflict between our thinking mind and the emotional mind. This is the problem. But we don't see this that way. What we see is that we or the world is not behaving in the way we want. That means we are in conflict with the world. Because the world, things are born, they begin to grow old, and they begin to die. Birth, old age, and death. This is what is going on in the world. And we don't like that. We don't want that to happen. And because we don't want that to happen, it still happens. And therefore, we are unhappy. So what normal people want to do is to change the world. But changing the world is a dream. Changing the world is a dream. But today, the mind of the human being has advanced to a great level. That is why we have this thing called science. And what is the human being doing with this science? He is trying to change the world. What has science done? It has changed the world. When we want light, we have light. We have this thing called electricity. So we have lights, we have fans, we have air conditioning, we have vehicles that go fast, we have vehicles even to fly in the air like birds. We have even created a vehicle to go even to the moon. And now we can go even beyond the moon to other planets. What else have we done? We want to kill our enemies. So, what has science done? Created the nuclear weapons. And now people are frightened that the whole world will be destroyed because of this. All this is because people are trying to gain control over nature. Why? Because nature is not going on in the way we want. So we want to control the world, control the nature. Once a certain person came to the Buddha and said, the Buddha is a very powerful person. He has the power to make a wish and he can change the world. He said, if the Buddha was able to just make the wish, may this Himalaya mountain become a mountain of gold. It will automatically become a mountain of gold. He has such powers. Please, out of compassion for these suffering human beings, make that wish. The Buddha said, you are right. You have understood that I can do things like that. But if I do that, do you know how many people are going to be killed as a result? Because people will be fighting to get this mountain of gold. They want to own it. They want to make it mine. This is why I won't make that wish. And instead of doing that, what did the Buddha do? He had all these powers, but he used this power not to transform nature, not to change the world, but to change your mind. And he transformed the human mind and produced what is called the Arahant, the Buddha, where you can change your emotional mind, which is a stupid mind. The emotions cannot think and reason out. It is only the thinking mind that can think and reason out. The thinking mind should gain control over the emotional mind. But today what has happened is the emotional mind is in control over the thinking mind. And the thinking mind has become a slave of the emotional mind. That is why all the sufferings in the world. That is why there is no peace and happiness in the world. It is only when the thinking mind gains control over the emotional mind that there will be happiness in the world. What we need is not to control nature. What we need is to control our own mind. This is the important message brought to the world by the Buddha. And that is what we have to understand on this special day we call Wesak. It is only by learning to gain control over our emotional mind. And the only way to do that is to become fully aware of the emotional mind. That is what is called Satipatthana. The word Satipatthana is today translated in the wrong way. People call it mindfulness. What does that word mindfulness mean? Mind being full. What we have to do is not to fill the mind. What we have to do is to empty the mind. The mind is full of desires of all kinds. The mind has to be emptied to get rid of all these desires and hatreds, fears and worries. To do that, we have to be fully conscious, fully aware of what is going on. And to be fully aware is not to be aware of what is going on outside. We have to be fully aware of what is going on inside. So what we really need is what is called introspection. The real meaning of the word Satipatthana is not mindfulness, it is introspection. Introspection is the important thing that we need. And that is the only way to gain freedom from all sufferings. So this is the important thing that we have to learn. And by learning this, we can awaken from the dream of existence. What does that mean? When the Buddha started emptying the mind, he came to the point where the mind stopped completely. Because mind is not another entity separate from the body. What we call the mind is an activity, not an entity. It is like the flame. If you have a flame in a candle, the flame is not an entity. The flame is an activity. This is why when the flame stops, if you ask the question, where did the flame go? How would you answer the question? The flame didn't go anywhere. Because the flame was not an entity. It is the entity that goes here and there. The flame is an activity. And the activity is dependent on certain conditions. When the conditions are absent, the flame disappears. So in the same way, what we call the mind is not an entity, it is an activity. And the activity is dependent on conditions. And when the conditions are absent, the activity is absent. That is what the Buddha realized. And not only that, he stopped the mind and he started it all over again. And when he was able to start it, he began to realize one important point. What was that? That the whole world that we are aware of is a creation of this activity called mind. The world that we are aware of, not only the world, even the self that we are aware of is an activity. So there is no self, there is no world. It is only a creation of the mental process that is going on. And that means we don't really exist. Existence is not a reality. Existence is what is called an appearance. Existence is an appearance and not a reality. And if we don't really exist, can we die? Before we can die, we have to exist. And if we don't exist, how can we die? So both existence and death are illusions or delusions. It is only when we have got out of this delusion, all suffering comes to an end. But as long as we continue with this delusion, we will be suffering. So we have to awaken from this dream of existence. When we use the word Buddha, we are simply saying one who has awakened from the dream of existence. Buddha is the awakened one. One who has awakened from the dream of existence. I hope you understood, and that is a good understanding to celebrate Wesak. So I think we can end our talk here. And if you have any questions to ask, you can ask, and I can try to explain.
One day you just say, assistant is an appearance. Assistant is an appearance.
Yeah. Existence is an appearance, not a reality. Yeah.
But we are as real as we are now. So
We are what?
see, we are at this present moment. I am existing. So I am real. So just now one day say assistant is an appearance. So that means I am existing.
How can you be existing if it is only an appearance?
That's why very confusing.
It is confusing because this is why the Buddha said, all normal human beings are insane. You see? If you are insane, so you have to awaken from this dream, and then only you will be sane. This is how it is. This is why only the Buddha or the Arahant is sane. Everyone else is insane. This is why we say that the teaching of the Buddha is the real psychotherapy. The normal psychotherapy is an effort to make abnormal people normal. But the psychotherapy of the Buddha is to make the normal people supernormal. So the Arahant or the Buddha is not a normal person, but a supernormal person. That is the meaning of the word Arya that he used. So he has used two words, Putujjana and Arya. Putujjana is the ordinary person, the normal person. And Arya is the supernormal person. And for that, to make a normal person a supernormal person, we have to follow the supernormal eightfold way. And that supernormal eightfold way begins with what is called Samadhi. That is, the Samadhi means the harmonious understanding. The harmonious understanding. The harmonious because it brings about harmony. Harmony is the opposite of conflict. Because we are having a conflict between our desires and reality. Our desires, our emotions are in conflict with reality. So when we have understood that we don't really exist and existence is an illusion, that understanding itself is the harmonious understanding. So when we have understood it in proper way, then the next step is to start living according to that understanding. So that is why we begin with Samadhi, the harmonious perspective. Samadhi is the harmonious perspective. Perspective is the angle of vision. That means if we take a camera and take a picture, that picture is simply one angle. If we turn it in the other direction and take another picture, that picture will be completely different from the first picture. So this is a picture that looks at everything from all the angles. That is why it is harmonious. You have heard the story of the blind man and the elephant. So one blind man touches the tail and says the elephant is like a broom. Another man touches the leg and says the elephant is like a tree. But everyone is saying the truth. But it is not the whole truth. It is only part of the truth. But the Buddha looks at it from all directions and he understands it. So in the same way, the harmonious perspective is to look at it from all directions, and you don't come in conflict with anyone in the world. That is the harmonious perspective. So if we have the harmonious perspective, the next step is to begin to take the harmonious orientation. Orientation is to turn in the right direction. If you turn in the right direction, it is like a person who has been going north is now going south. That means if you turn your car, you are taking what is called a U-turn. When you take the U-turn, you are going in the opposite direction. So once you have turned in the opposite direction, then however much you press your accelerator, it will be going in the right direction. So in the same way, the next step is to turn your mind in the right direction. That is what is called Samma Sankappa. First, Samadhi is a harmonious perspective. The second step is the right orientation, which is Samma Sankappa. And once you take the right orientation, Samma Vacha, Samma Kammant, Samma Ajiva, means you will be speaking in the right way, you will be acting in the right way, and you will be living in the right way.
Something like Eightfold Path.
Huh?
Is it Eightfold Path?
That is the Eightfold Path, yeah. That is, huh?
Is Bhante talking about the Eightfold Path?
Yeah. That's the Eightfold Path. And that is what is called entering the stream. Entering the stream is to turn the other way and start moving in the right direction. That means you have entered the stream. Sotapanna. Sotapanna. So that is how you gradually begin to go in the right direction.